Most people think intelligence is an advantage, a head start, a shortcut through life. They were told this as children. They still believe it. That's the first problem. If you were the smart kid, you remember how it started. Teachers noticed you early. You understood things faster. Adults repeated the same words. "You're so smart." It felt like a gift. It wasn't. It was a cage, built before you were old enough to refuse it, because you weren't being praised for effort. You were being praised for identity, not for what you did, for what you were. And the mind of a child is simple. It takes that label, and it builds a self around it. School reinforces the cage. For years, things just work. You barely study. The grades come anyway. Struggle is something that happens to other people, and your brain absorbs a quiet assumption. If you're truly intelligent, things should feel easy. That assumption is a trap with no visible walls, because difficulty doesn't arrive as a test. It arrives as a feeling, a creeping sense that something is wrong, that maybe the label was a mistake. And when that feeling appears, the mind doesn't question the assumption, it protects it. From the outside, this looks like procrastination, laziness, potential wasted. From the inside, it's something else entirely. It's a contract. If I never try seriously, no one can prove I'm not exceptional. Projects go unfinished. Ideas stay locked in the mind. The gap between what you imagine and what you produce becomes permanent. Not because you lack ability, because finishing something makes it real, and real things can be judged. You can see this mechanism in small moments. You open a blank document, the cursor blinks. The idea in your mind feels sharp, precise, almost brilliant, but the first sentence looks ordinary, flat, not exceptional. And suddenly closing the document feels safer than finishing the page, because an unfinished idea still contains perfection. A finished one can be measured. This is the mechanism, not laziness, not fear of failure in the ordinary sense, fear of a specific verdict, that you were never as exceptional as they said, that the compliments were noise, that the identity was borrowed. Most people who carry this never say it out loud. They construct explanations instead. Wrong timing, wrong environment, not ready yet. The mind is sophisticated. It will generate reasons indefinitely. There is another layer. When intelligence is your identity, your sense of quality develops early. You know what good work looks like. You can feel the distance between ordinary and exceptional. But knowing what excellence looks like and being able to produce it, those are different things. Skill is built through repetition, through failure, through the kind of sustained, unglamorous effort that the gifted kid was never required to make. So when you sit down to create something, the gap is immediate. The idea feels powerful. The execution looks like nothing, and the conclusion arrives fast. I've lost it. But you never had it. Not in the way you thought. What you had was taste. What you lacked was tolerance for the process. The people who eventually surpass the smart kids aren't always more intelligent. They simply learned something the smart kid couldn't afford to learn. That being bad at something is not evidence of a permanent deficiency. It's just the beginning of the process. The smart kid watches this and calls it mediocrity, because accepting that logic would require dismantling everything: the identity, the narrative, the version of themselves they've been maintaining for decades. Most people never do it. They find a comfortable level, somewhere below their potential but above failure, and they stay there, quietly. This is what the gifted child becomes. Not a failure, something more precise than that. A person who optimized for the protection of an idea about themselves, at the cost of actually becoming someone. The cage doesn't look like a cage from the inside. It looks like standards, discernment, knowing your own worth. But the bars are there. You can feel them every time you almost start. Being the smart kid was a description of your childhood, nothing more. But the mind doesn't file it there. It files it as the only version of yourself worth being, and it will defend that version quietly, consistently, for the rest of your life, unless you decide to look at the mechanism directly, not to fix it, not to heal it, just to see it for what it is. The question was never what you were capable of. You already know the answer to that. The real question is what you've been protecting, and how much of your life it has already cost. If this exposed something you've never said out loud, you already know where you are. Subscribe. More mechanisms. No motivation, no noise, just the truth about how the mind actually works.